Zam! She's 40! Never judge a book by its cover. We start off with the pregnant woman, Kate, who's in labor coming into the hospital with her husband, John. They're about to have their third child. She's now in the theater and the doctor's telling her she just lost her baby. Very sad. She's screaming her lungs off when her husband walks in with the camera. Then, before we know it, the doctor brings out a baby drenched in tomato sauce. Everything is just weird. She lets out a super loud scream and then boom! She wakes up. It was all a dream, thank goodness. She's not even pregnant in real life, but she goes to the mirror and raises her shirt and we see a scar, which tells us she has given birth before. She takes some pills and goes to sit on the floor. Later, she's with her shrink, Dr. Browning, talking about the dream, and we find out she once had a stillbirth. Ugh, that's hard. The doctor thinks the dream could be related to the stillbirth, but Kate thinks it could be because she and her husband are thinking of adopting and are going to see children soon. She thinks maybe she's not ready for kids yet. After therapy, Kate goes to pick her daughter, Max, from school. Max is deaf, by the way. On the drive back home, she nearly gets into an accident. Very nearly. Anyway, she's home now, and it would appear that Kate is a virtuoso. I mean, look at her on the piano. But Max is playing basketball outside, and the stomps from the ball are doing her head in, so she goes out and tells her to stop. While she's there, John pulls up with their son, Daniel. They play a little, and then they all go in. Later at night, Kate reads Max a bedtime story and then tucks her in. Then we see Kate write something in a little diary before heading to take her pills. Her husband startles her and they kiss. Man, she just took medicine. How are you not tasting that in her mouth? Just kidding. I always kiss my girl after she takes my medicine. Anyway, she basically says that she has a headache and they head to bed. She says she's nervous. They talk about the adoption and she says she wants to take the love that they had for Jessica, the baby they lost, and give it to someone who really needs it. So we cut to them driving to St. Mariana Home for Girls. There are so many people here and the nun comes to greet them. They're inside now. Little girls are playing everywhere and John follows the sound of a little girl's voice to her room. She's singing and painting. She introduces herself as Esther and she and John start talking. He'll soon end up wishing he never followed that voice. Esther's telling him the stories behind her painting. The one she's working on is about a lioness who's sad because she can't find her cubs. She's now asleep dreaming of her babies. And while she's asleep, the cubs find her. I have a feeling this movie doesn't have an ending as happy as this painting. As they're talking, Kate and sister Abigail walk in. Kate says hi to Esther, checks out the paintings, and then sits to have a conversation with her. The couple obviously love Esther. Next thing, they're in the office with sister Abigail talking about Esther. She's originally from Russia and only came into the US a few years ago, but her English is so good. The family that brought her to the US died in a fire. Rip in peace. She always wears ribbons on her neck and wrists, and it's war if you ever try to take it off. Sister Abigail thinks the couple had a really great connection with little Esther. Their decision is made. They adopt her. I was also adopted. On the drive back home, Kate teaches Esther some basic sign language so she can communicate well with Max. Once they get home, Max runs down to say hi. Esther introduces herself using the sign language she has been practicing the entire way home. They go in and she meets Grandma Barbara. She's so proper. Then she meets Daniel, who asks his dad why she's dressed like that. Next, we see Esther unwrapping her gifts. And while that's happening, Daniel and his friends are playing a guitar video game on the side. Daniel asks his dad to come watch him twice, but what he gets are cold, unenthusiastic replies, while Esther's getting tight hugs and gifts. Parents are always playing favorites. Feeling neglected, Daniel drops the guitar and heads out to the treehouse with his friends to look at sussy magazines. In the house, Kate and Grandma are having a conversation. Grandma asks Kate what her plans are, and she says she's just going to get Esther settled and go back to teaching. But she's not going back to Yale. She's just going to be giving lessons from home. We also discover that Kate once had a drinking problem, but she was able to get over it without AA. She's a stronger person than me, that's for sure. I can't quite kick my League of Legends addiction. At night, she goes to meet John, but the girls come in and spoil the party. They're scared of the lightning. Bad timing, girls. Really bad timing. Esther insists on sleeping beside John, though. Not to spoil anything, but that is something to keep note of. Anyway, the next day, the kids are ready for school, and Esther comes down in some dress that looks like it was made in the 60s. Kate asks her to go change into jeans because she's scared the kids at school might laugh at her, but Esther manages to convince her to let her go in her dress. The kids at school did laugh at her, calling her dress a little Bo Peep outfit. Esther gives the girls that made that comment a very menacing look, and we will get to see what that means later. Back home, we see Esther and Max playing out in the snow by the water, and Kate runs out to yell at them. "You don't play by the water, you know that," she says. She looks very terrified. Now we see Daniel shooting at action figures with a paintball gun. Then a bird lands on the board. He shoots it and it falls. The girls arrive just as the bird falls to the ground, and they are all now looking at the bird writhing in pain. Then Esther picks up a rock, hands it to Daniel, and tells him to put the bird out of its misery, but he chickens out of killing the bird. No pun intended. So Esther just does it herself. She smashes the bird in with the rock. Sigma female detected. Next thing, we see a little tussle between Esther and Kate. Kate when Esther locks her room door. Apparently, they don't lock doors in this house, but Esther insists that she wants her privacy, so she offers to sing so Kate knows she's okay. Kate reluctantly agrees. She can hear Esther sing while she's doing laundry. During laundry, she finds an old Bible with a picture inside it. It belongs to Esther. She drops the Bible while trying to take out the picture, but she puts it back and returns the Bible back to the drawer. All is back to normal. Or is it? Because just as she was going downstairs, Esther opened the door and gave her a menacing look. Next day at school, in the hallway, Daniel throws her books to the ground. Her Bible falls, and the girls from the class the other day pick it up and mock her again, calling her a freak. While she was trying to retrieve her Bible, there was a little tussle and the Bible tore up and scattered everywhere. But the bully didn't stop there. She pulled on the ribbon on Esther's neck, and Esther let out the loudest scream ever. Like Sister Abigail said, don't ever touch her ribbons. Later that day, back at home, Kate is teaching Esther to play the piano. It would appear that Esther is something of a perfectionist, because when her mother tells her she's doing great, she says, "No, I didn't. I made 11 mistakes." Me every time I record one of these voiceovers, except it's about 110 mistakes. Kate now tries to get her to talk about what happened at school, but she doesn't really want to. Kate moves on though, and shows her a little scrapbook. There are pictures from her wedding, pictures of Daniel and Max from when they were younger, and then a picture of Esther when she joined the family. Then Esther asks her who Jessica is because Max always talks about her. Then Kate takes her to where they scattered Jessica's ashes and tell her about the stillbirth. Esther's tearing up now and then says, "She would have been lucky. You're a great mommy." Later at night, John and Kate are making a pickle sandwich when suddenly Esther walks by. It just had to be her. Next morning, Kate goes to talk to her about last night. She's doing her best to explain that that's just something adults do. But Esther just blurts out, "I know, they clap." Kate and John are now talking about that. John thinks she just picked it up at school or somewhere, but Kate insists it's not just that. She said Esther knew exactly what she was talking about and didn't expect to get into trouble over it. John says she'll talk to her about it later at night, but Kate thinks it's a better idea to take her to the shrink. John doesn't think so. He doesn't want to make such a big deal out of it. Kate reluctantly agrees. Next day, John is at the playground with the girls when a woman walks up to him and starts small talk. She actually looks like she's flirting with John, and Esther's on the swing giving one of her signature menacing looks to the woman and another little girl. The little girl walks up on one of those wooden houses at the park, and just when she was at the mouth of it where you slide down, Esther comes from behind and pushes her. Max sees what happens. At dinner time, John questions her about that, but she denies it and says they were just playing. Max also covers up for her. Before we're even 3 bites into dinner, Daniel starts taking a dig at Esther, calls her a freak, and even uses the F word. Very naughty. Then the funniest joke, he says she's from Transylvania. When he's done, he storms off from the table and his dad follows him to go give him a talking to. Then we see John locking the treehouse and telling Daniel he'll only get the key back when he apologizes. That face, though, doesn't look like one ready to apologize. Meanwhile, Kate and the girls are at the mall trying to get stuff for dinner when Sister Abigail calls. Kate tries to hand the phone to Esther to talk to her, but Esther says a loud no. Kate just goes on to update Sister Abigail on how things have been going with Esther. Next, we see Esther back at home doing an absolute madness on the piano. If Kate is a virtuoso, then this is probably Beethoven reborn. Kate hears it and is shocked. "You told me you didn't know how to play," she asks. But Esther says she actually never said that. Kate only offered to teach her, and she accepted because she thought it must be frustrating for someone like her, who enjoys music so much, to have a son who isn't interested and a daughter who can't even hear. Oof, what a burn. Those words hit Kate so hard. She asks Esther to wait, but the little girl just walks off. Of course, Kate goes to talk about this with her husband, but John is defending her again. And Kate points out that she's always on her best behavior with John, but completely different when she's with her. He keeps trying to defend her, so Kate hits him with something she said about him. Apparently, Esther told Kate that John was hitting on that woman from the park. Now he's trying to defend himself, but it's not a good look that he didn't tell his wife about the incident after it happened. If you have a girlfriend, you'd know how this can get you in trouble. But I don't have a girlfriend, so I don't. But wait a minute. It would appear that John cheated some 10 years ago, but only told her about it 2 years ago. Meanwhile, she put their child's life in danger some months back. Oh, these guys have some really ugly skeletons in their closet. And it looks like this place is LGBTQ friendly because everything is coming out of the closet now. That was a banger joke. I gotta give my writer a raise. The next day, Sister Abigail visits. She's telling them she thinks there might be something wrong with Esther. Where there's trouble, she's always there. Remember the family we mentioned that brought her to the US? The ones that died in a fire? Apparently, it was arson. John thinks it's ridiculous to think Esther's responsible for all this, but Kate is obviously entertaining the possibility. While they're deep in this conversation, Esther's eavesdropping, and then she goes to tell Max that there's a mean woman there to take her away, and she needs her help. Before we know it, they're in a room. Max finds a key and hands it to Esther, who uses it to open a safe where they see a lock. Esther takes it out, removes all the bullets leaving one in, and asks Max if she wants to play Russian roulette. Come on, who is this devilish kid? Max says no and Esther says maybe later. Maybe never. Anyway, Sister Abigail gets in her car and is leaving the house now, while the girls run through the woods to go and try and ambush her. When Esther sees Sister Abigail's car approaching, she pushes Max into the road, and that causes her to swerve and then stop the car and step out. She rushes straight to Max, who's crying in the middle of the road, and while she's bent over her, Esther comes from behind and smashes her head in with a hammer. It gets worse. She yells at Max to stop crying, and then tells her to grab a foot and help her drag the body off the road. At this point, I'm wondering if Esther cast a spell on Max. While they're trying to drag Sister Abigail off the road, a car starts approaching, so Esther just pushes her. Sister Abigail gains consciousness and tries to crawl away, but Esther bonks her repeatedly with the hammer. She hits her maybe 10 times, man. No joke. Then she tells Max to help her hide the evidence. After she's done, they go back home and she hides the weapon, the gloves, and all that stuff in a bag in the tree house. Now she's making sure Max doesn't tell on her by telling her she'll be sent to jail just for helping her hide the body. The little girl is obviously so scared. She's traumatized, but she promises not to tell on Esther. As they're coming down from the treehouse, Daniel sees them, but he hides so he'll not be seen. But he didn't hide well enough. At night, Esther shows up in his room, pulls a knife on him while he's asleep, and asks him what he saw earlier in the day. Those no locked doors rule isn't really doing this family any favors now, is it? The boy confesses that he only saw them coming down the treehouse, nothing more. She lets him go, but not before he pees himself. Relatable. The next day, Kate and John take Esther to go see Dr. Browning, who says she doesn't think anything is wrong with Esther. What she thinks is wrong is actually Kate. She says Kate is blocking Esther off, even though the little girl is trying to do everything to please and bond with her new mom. Yeah, right. While Dr. Browning has nothing but the best things to say about Esther, Esther's in a toilet stall kicking, punching, screaming, and wreaking havoc on everything. They get home and Esther just runs out of the car and into the house. It would appear that the visit to the shrink has caused another argument between the couple, but before they could really even kick off the argument proper, a nun from the St. Mariana Home for Girls calls Kate, asking her if Sister Abigail made it to her appointment with her. Later that night, detectives find the body and they pay the family a visit. They say they don't have any leads or suspects yet, but from Kate's face, you can tell she already has a suspect. Meanwhile, Esther seems to be toying with the idea of burning up the house. She's envisioning it through her drawing. Kate is in her room doing some serious research trying to find out what's wrong with Esther. She makes some findings, prints them out, and goes to show her husband. She thinks Esther's character disturbed, but John is still not very convinced. Sir, open your eyes. He asks his wife if she's going to show her findings to Dr. Browning, and she says no. The resolution is that Kate will contact the orphanage Esther came from in Russia. At least John agrees to one thing. She contacts them, but apparently they have no record of her being there. What a surprise. Not really. Next day, John tries to get Esther to go to the dentist, but she says she doesn't want to go. So he says it's calm and tells her to come downstairs and draw with him. Meanwhile, his wife is dropping the other kids at school and asking them how they've been getting along with Esther, and if she's ever hurt them. They say no. I mean, what else could they say? These kids are scared to their very bones. Back home, Esther is declaring her love for John. I like it when it's just the two of us. You don't know how long I've waited for a daddy just like you. She says, whoa, mommy too, right? John asks, but she replies that she doesn't think mommy likes her very much. Well, no, she doesn't, because you're a psycho, and she sees right through you. John tries to convince her that mom loves her and tells her to do something nice for mommy to show her that she loves her too. And what does Esther do? She picks the roses on which Jessica's ashes were spread and brings them to her. But still, John doesn't see that this girl is evil. Honestly, I understand when women say men are stupid, because all the red flags are right there in his face, but he's choosing to be colorblind. But if you think you've seen the worst of this little girl, watch this. While Kate is outside crying in front of her late daughter's ashes, Esther goes to the workshop, breaks her own bone, then goes to her room to cry for her daddy. He takes her to the hospital, and when they get back, she has to sleep on his bed. And of course, he tucks her in. This man goes ahead and tells his wife to go sleep downstairs, because Esther wants him all to herself. Bro, I know it's bedtime, but wake up already. This is strange. All these things are pushing Kate over the edge. She goes to buy 2 bottles of wine, but she manages to stop herself from drinking the angry juice. She empties 1 bottle in the sink. Next day, she goes to drop the kids at school. Daniel and Esther get out of the car, and then Kate gets out too, to help Daniel get his books which fell. Then Esther opens the driver's seat, puts the car in reverse, and removes it from the brake. So the car starts reversing really fast. So fast that nobody could stop it. Fortunately, oncoming cars swerve, and the car crashes into the snow. Max is okay, but she still refuses to blow Esther's cover, even though she saw her do what she did. Now Kate is being questioned by Dr. Browning and her husband. They're pretty much putting all the blame on her, and it doesn't help at all that they found the bottle of wine from last night. John is tying the incident from this morning to the bottle, and he isn't believing anything coming out of Kate's mouth. She's really fighting for her life right now, but John says he'll give her a week to go rehab, and if she doesn't, he'll leave with the kids. At this point, I'm really hurting for Kate. What the hell type of gaslighting is this? Max is eavesdropping and shedding a tear. Then Esther comes and says, I'll shoot mommy if you tell. Goddamn. At this point, Daniel decides to step step up. He runs into Max's room and asks her if Esther did anything to make the car crash. She says yes, but when Daniel says she has to say something, she says she can't. He asks why, and then she shows him some paintings. Those paintings show everything that happened with Sister Abigail. He asks if the weapons and other stuff are still in the tree house. She says yes. So he says he'll go and get them. Then his parents will have to believe them. The boy's being smart, except he's talking too loudly and Esther was eavesdropping the whole time. At night, Kate wakes up and goes into Max's room. It seems like she planned to run away with the kids, but guess who was there waiting for her? Esther, of course. She has been reading Kate's diary, so she knows everything. Well, isn't that a convenient plot detail? She knows where she used to hide her bottles, how she passed out drunk and left Max to almost drown in the pond, how her husband cheated, all the details of her stillbirth as described with her own words, everything. The next day, Kate goes into her room and ransacks everywhere looking for that Bible she found the other time. She finds it and sees a clue, the name of an institute. She Googles it and calls the number she finds. Through that call, Kate finds out that the institute is not an orphanage but a mental hospital. While the call is going on, Daniel goes up to the treehouse and breaks in. While he's looking for the evidence, Esther comes in, brings out the evidence and shows him, and then sets the treehouse on fire, locking him inside. But Daniel manages to climb out through the window. He tries to hold on, but he falls to the floor and is knocked out cold. Esther picks up a rock and tries to finish him off, as she did the bird, but Max comes out at the right time and pushes her away. Kate then comes and takes Daniel to the hospital. He has a neck injury, but he'll be fine. But guess what? John still refuses to even think that all this could be Esther. Bro, was a spell cast on you or something? How can one man be so naive? While the couple are arguing, Esther asks Grandma for $1 for the soda machine and leaves. But she doesn't go to the soda machine. She goes straight to Daniel's room. Max knows her too well, so she follows her. She sees that she's not really at the soda machine, so she hurries to tell her parents something is wrong. Meanwhile, Esther just finished smothering Daniel. He is flatlined, and a code 99 is now being announced. Apparently, he's in cardiac arrest. Kate runs straight to Esther and lands a slap on her face. The orderlies at the hospital come and restrain her and inject her with a sedative. You won't believe it. At this point, John still thinks Esther is a saint. This is why I don't like beta males. When Kate wakes up, John comes and tells her that he's taking Max and Esther home. She begs him not to let Esther near Max, but he ignores her. What a mad lad. He's tucking Max into bed and the little girl is obviously scared of Esther, who's standing by the door, but John doesn't see it. Esther comes in, pretends to be kissing Max on the forehead, and steals her hearing aid, which she just puts down by her bedside. John is now in the living room drinking and smoking while Esther is upstairs cutting up a dress that belongs to Kate. She cuts it to her size, puts it on, puts some makeup on, and comes to serve John some fruits and biscuits. She's now sitting so close to him, telling him she loves him, but still nothing clicks for him. Not until she whispers, "Let me take care of you, John." What in the world is going on? I don't like this. Fortunately, he eventually gets back to his senses and yells at her to go back to her room. She yells back to him to stop talking to her like she's a child, but he insists. But wait a second, you're supposed to be a child. Anyway, he also tells her he'll call Sister Judith tomorrow to discuss her future in this house. But that was not the smartest thing to say. She goes up to her room and is crying. Meanwhile, Kate gets a call from a doctor from the institute who tells her he recognizes Esther and she's not really a child. Her name is Lena, and she's a 33-year-old woman with a rare hormonal disorder, which makes her look like a child. Now, if you think this is hard to believe, remember, Hasbulla exists. While still on the call, Kate starts heading back home. The doctor keeps telling her about how violent Esther is, and how she killed the last man she was not able to successfully be with, and set their house ablaze. Yes, that family that adopted her. Apparently, she wears those ribbons to cover up scars on her wrists and neck, scars from the asylum. Back home, Esther destroys everything in her room and leaves. The noise makes John go upstairs to check on her. He doesn't find her, but what he finds absolutely shocks him. All sorts of sick paintings on the wall, only visible in ultraviolet light. He hears the phone ringing, so he goes downstairs to get it. It's Kate calling, but just before he can answer, the light in the entire house goes off. Kate, by the way, nearly crashes into another car as she was using her phone while driving, but she manages to swerve at the last minute and her phone falls. She manages to get her phone back and calls 911. John goes downstairs to check while the lights went off, but he can't fix it. He's back up now trying to find his way using a flashlight when Esther comes and stabs him from behind. Kate is calling, but due to the latest developments, he can't pick up, so she's driving like Vin Diesel now. Meanwhile, Esther is clapping John. Then she sees Max up the stairs and goes after her. She has a special treat in store for her. She goes to the safe to get the shotgun. Just then, Kate crashes into the house. She sees her husband unconscious on the floor, but as she's weeping, she remembers her daughter is also in the house. So she's running everywhere looking for her. She doesn't find her, but unfortunately for Kate herself, Esther finds her and shoots her in the arm from downstairs. She then comes upstairs to try and finish the job, but Kate sees her coming and manages to climb out the window to hide. While she's on the roof, she sees Max and communicates with her, but that doesn't stop Esther from chasing Max around and shooting at her. Kate had to jump down from the roof and land on Esther in order to stop her from clapping her daughter. She grabs Max and heads out just as the cops arrive, but they still aren't safe yet. Esther appears from behind and attacks Kate. She tries to stab her, but Kate is fighting for her dear life. While that is going on, Max picks up the gun and tries to shoot Esther, but she's only a little girl. How good can her aim be? The bullet hits the ice, it cracks, and both women fall in. in. The tussle keeps going on. Kate nearly gets out twice, but Esther grabbed a hold of her both times. But the second time, Kate kicks her in the jaw and she goes down into the water. She then carries her child and leaves. Moral of the story? Hasbullah.